Good day, everyone. I am Eden Reyes Razonable, and I am here to discuss Rizal's life in London, Brussels, Belgium, and Hong Kong, China, before he was exiled in the Bitan, Mindanao. Trip in London. So after Rizal's trip to the United States of America, he left New York City on May 16, 1888 and arrived in Liverpool, England. So he arrived in Liverpool, England in May 24, 1888. He stayed for a day at Delphi Hotel and left for London the following day. He was welcomed by Dr. Antonio Regidor. He was invited in his home in the next day when he arrived, May 25, 1888. So, Dr. Antonio Rizal had reasons why he chose to live in London. First, he wanted to enhance his knowledge on the English language and sought to have further study on Antonio Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, to do research on the Philippine history and to continue to write for La Solidaridad in defense of his people against the Spanish tyranny. So he wanted to go to London to study Antonio Morga's book, and then he continued writing La Solidaridad. And then Rizal met Dr. Reinhold Ross. He is a librarian of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he is also an authority on Malay languages and customs. Dr. Ross was the one who allowed Rizal to undertake research at the British Museum. Thankful to Dr. Ross, Rizal had the time to read Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. The doctor was also the one who inspired Rizal to contribute 2 articles. So Rizal contributed 2 articles in the Asian Studies journal Truner's Record in May 1889. So the articles, the title of the articles he contributed were Specimen of Tagal Folklore, which is a collection of 14 proverbs and 8 puzzles and 2 verses. And the second one is the 2 Eastern fables. This is a comparison of Japanese fables with the Filipino fables. At that time, he transferred and became a boarder of the Beckett family. Unfortunately, he still received good and bad news from the Philippines while he was in London, and some of them are as follows. So he received bad news and good news from the Philippines. The first is the persecution of his fellow Filipinos who signed the anti-friar petition of 1888 that was submitted to the Queen Regent for the expulsion of the friars in the Philippines. The second one is also a bad news. Persecution of the tenants of Calamba, including the Rizal family and relatives, because of their petition for the reform in the government. And the third, again, it's a bad news. The exile of Rizal's brother-in-law, Manuel T. Hidalgo in Bohol. And fourth, furious attacks at the Spanish senators. And fifth, the arrest of Rizal's friend, Loreno Vida for keeping copies of Noli Me Tangere in his home. And the sixth was a good news. The good news that Reverend Vicente Garcia defended the Noli against the attacks of the friars. So let us continue. In September 1888, Rizal continued his research on Bibliothèque Nationale and learned the French language. Here it is. Earlier, in September 1888, Rizal went to Paris to continue his research on Philippine history in Bibliothèque Nationale, or the National Library in Paris. There, he polished the annotated version of Antonio Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. Rizal stayed in the house of Valentin Ventura. Despite the good life that he had in Paris, Rizal kept himself busy at the National Library. He also studied the French language and made plenty of lesson drills for the students. So on December 24, 1888, Rizal spent his Christmas and New Year with the Becket family and was attracted to Gertrude Becket, aka Toti or Sisi. On December 24, 1888, Rizal spent his Christmas and New Year with the Becket family. That time, Rizal was attracted to another woman, Gertrude Becket, known by her nickname Toti or Sisi. Like Segunda Katigbak, Gertrude was small and chubby. This just goes to show that Rizal's love for Leonor Rivera was not that deep. But unlike Leonor, Gertrude was not as appealing. Rizal was interested with Gertrude because they had close relationship and have a happy family. Rizal, however, prevented his feelings for Gertrude when she knew that she was falling in love with him. So, and next is that in December 1888, Rizal met the leaders of the propaganda movement, Marcelo H. Del Pilar and Mariano Ponce. Rizal was also welcomed by Juan Luna and his wife in London. Rizal visited Madrid and Barcelona again on 1888, and there he met Marcelo H. Del Pilar and Mariano Ponce, the leaders of the propaganda movement. Rizal became more active in the propaganda movement with his fellow illustrators. In the face of Rizal's absence, he was still chosen to be the honorary president during the inauguration of Asociación La Solidaridad on December 31, 1888, which was founded by Graciano Lopez Hiena in Barcelona on February 15, 1889. The propaganda movement reforms. The next that Rizal did in London was that he made reforms for the propaganda movement. And the movement aimed for reforms such as for the Philippines to be made a province of Spain so that the native Filipinos would have equal rights accorded to Spaniards. Second, to have a representative of the Philippines in the Spanish Cortes. And third, secularization of parishes. Rizal became busy in writing articles and essays that were published in the propaganda movement's newspaper, La Solidaridad. Rizal had translated into Tagalog the letter of the women of Malayos on February 22, 1889 as requested by Marcelo H. Del Pilar. Lastly, on March 19, 1889, the founding of Kidlat Club and Indios Bravos by Rizal and the Redención de los Malayos, or Rdlm, on 1890 in Paris. So Rizal founded the Kidlat Club and the Indios Bravos on March 19, 1889 to prove that the Filipinos are not only capable of excellence but can also be the best in terms of intellectual and physical aspects. Another society that Rizal founded in Paris in 1990 was the Rdlm, Redención de los Malayos. Its acronym revived the Malay race for the purpose of increasing the knowledge of the people in the Philippines. To continue his writing for La Solidaridad, Rizal contributed articles such as The Filipinas dentro de 100 años, The Philippines a century hence, and the essay Sobre la indolencia de los Filipinos, or in English, On the Indolence of the Filipinos, in 1890. In Paris, Rizal published Por Telefono using the screen name Dimas Alang to answer the attacks of the Spanish friar, Father Salvacion Font, against the novel Noli Me Tangere. Then on, Rizal went to Brussels, Belgium. On January 28, 1890, Rizal left Paris for Brussels, Belgium. He was accompanied by Jose Alberto when he moved to Brussels. When Jose Alberto left the country, an engineering student named Jose Alejandro stayed with Rizal at the boarding house owned by Suzanne and Marie Jacobi. Aside from the cost of living in Paris, which was too much, Rizal cannot focus on writing his second novel, El Filibusterismo. So in this time in Belgium, Brussels, Belgium, Rizal wrote his second novel, El Filibusterismo. It's next to Noli Me Tangere. While doing the chapters of the novel, he continued to write articles for La Solidaridad, and they were A la Defensa to La Defensa on April 30, 1889, as is answered to an anti-Filipino writing of Patricio de la Escorura. And the second one is La Verdad para Todos. On May 31, 1889, which means the truth for all. La Verdad para Todos, the truth for all. As his reply against the Spanish accusations that the Filipino officials were ignorant and immoral. And the third one is Vicente Barantes Teatro Tagalog on June 15, 1889, and followed by Barantes' Ignorance on the Theatrical Art of the Tagalog. I think they're the same. Vicente Barantes Teatro Tagalog meant, or which means Barantes' Ignorance on the Theatrical Art of the Tagalog on June 15, 1889. And the fourth is Una Profanation, a Profanation on July 31, 1889, on his attack against the friars for ignoring and not allowing Christian burial for his brother-in-law, Mariano Herbosa. And another, we have Crueldad, which means cruelty on English. He published it on July 31, 1889, defending Blumentritt from mocking and insulting attacks of his rivals. And 6, Verdades Nuevas, or in English, New Truths, on August 15, 1889. That because of the letter written by Vicente Belloc Sanchez, saying that if reforms were granted, it will start in the destruction of the peaceful ruling of the friars in the Philippines. And then another one he wrote, Diferencias, which meant differences in English, on September 15, 1889. This is in response to the attacks of the article saying mean and bad comments to the Filipinos who were then protesting for reforms from the Spanish government. Another, we have inconsequences or inconsequences in English. He published it on November 30, 1889 to defend Antonio Luna against the attacks of Pablo Mir Diaz. Article in El Pueblo Soberano, a newspaper in Barcelona. And we have Lianto y Risas, or Tears and Laughters, on November 30, 1889, as Rizal's way of saving the Filipinos from the Spaniards' racial prejudice. And the last one is Ingratitudes, or Ingratitudes in English. On January 15, 1890, in response to the Governor General Weyler's words that people of Calamba should not be fooled by empty promises of their ungrateful sons. So, to sustain his living conditions in Brussels, Rizal practiced and treated patients as a surgeon. So, Dr. Jose Rizal did medicine or practiced medicine as a surgeon. Unlike the Noli Me Tangere, Rizal spent too much time in writing El Filibusterismo and the articles for La Solidaridad. Rizal had been hearing news from Juan Luna and Valentin Ventura that his fellow Filipinos in Spain were too much into gambling. With this, Rizal sent a letter to Marcelo H. del Pilar on May 28, 1890. He sent a letter to Marcelo H. del Pilar, asking him to remind the Filipinos in Madrid that they are not to gamble in Europe but to work for the freedom of the Philippines. So you can really see that Rizal is very dedicated on his mission to free the Philippines from Spaniards. On the other hand, Rizal received bad news coming from home that his family and relatives were forced to leave and go to different places because the Calamba land problem had worsened. That the Dominican management raised the rents for the land. This was the reason why the tenants, including Rizal's father, refused to pay the rent, which resulted for the filing of a case by the Dominicans to strip the ownership of Calamba land from the Rizal family. The illegal eviction of his family angered Rizal and made him depressed. So Rizal planned to go home to the Philippines because he could not bear the pain about what happened to his family. Rizal then wrote a poem entitled Ami Musa, to my muse, to address his disappointments on the land problems of Calamba. This poem was published in La Solidaridad with Laong Laan as Rizal's pen name on December 15, 1890. The poem is entitled Ami Musa. Rizal failed to defend the case against the Dominicans, and justice was not received for his family and the tenants of Calamba. While in Madrid, Rizal attended a gathering of Filipinos where he had a fight with Antonio Luna and dared Wenceslao Retana to a duel. Retana was a Spanish scholar and Rizal's rival in writing. While in Madrid, Rizal asked for the help of the former members of the ministry who were liberal Spanish statesmen. but they only gave him a pat on his shoulder, and sympathized with him. The Asociación Hispano-Filipino was formed, led by Dr. Miguel Maraita, a Spanish professor and a Mason grandmaster. To decide what is the goal of the propaganda, they initiated an election who the leader will be. There were 9 participants and were all Filipinos. The competition was between Jose Rizal and Marcelo H. del Pilar, and during the first 2 canvass, Marcelo H. del Pilar was leading the votes, and it was Rizal who won in the end. But Rizal chose to leave rather than divide the Filipinos in Madrid. On February 1891, Rizal arrived in Biarritz, France. He was entertained by the Busted family. The 1-month trip to France made him forget all his bad experiences in Madrid, and on his vacation, he once again had an affection to Nelly Busted. He finished his second novel, El Filibusterismo, on March 29, 1891, and on March 30, 1891, the revision of the novel was completed, ready to be published anytime soon. So, Rizal left Madrid and went to Hong Kong. Rizal's life in Hong Kong. After he published the El Fili in Europe, he did not like the political situation between him and Marcelo del Pilar and the other Filipinos in Spain. It was during this time that Rizal heard that his friend Jose Panganiban, his pen name was Jomapa, bid his farewell to the world. As saddened as he was, he recognized Jomapa's talent, intelligence, and industry through ideology, considering him as a loss for the country. Due to his unpleasant experiences in Madrid, Rizal planned on leaving the political life in Europe to focus on his mission instead. On November 20, 1891, he arrived in Hong Kong. He then decided to practice medicine through his association with Dr. Lorenzo P. Marquez. So he applied for a license, and the license was then granted, eventually. His family went to Hong Kong, and he supported them in the city. While in Hong Kong, he translated The Rights of Man, written in French, into Tagalog, Ang Mga Karapatan ng Tao. He also wrote articles entitled A la Nación Española, to the Spanish nation, as a reconsideration for Spain to correct the wrong things they have done to the tenants of Calamba. And sa mga kababayan, to my countrymen, as Rizal's interpretation of the Calamba agrarian problem. During his days in Hong Kong, he started to write the Constitution of La Liga Filipina. Through the help of Jose Basa, La Liga Filipina aimed for the unity of the whole archipelago into one body, common protection in every want and necessity, protection against all forms of violence and injustice, stimulation of instruction, agriculture, and commerce, and the undertaking of the study and application of reforms. The motto of the League, La Liga Filipina, was Unus instar omnium, or one like one. Onus instar omnium. Omnium, or one like all. There were 3 organizational councils in La Liga: Popular, Provincial, and Supreme. Qualification in the tests and a recommendation from the town's council was necessary to become a member of this organization, and it also requires a monthly contribution for the following projects. So there were required to give, the members, they were required to give contributions for the following projects. One is helping a member or his son who had problem in financial his studies but with excellent aptitude for study. Second, helping members who are less fortunate. Third, lending funds to a member who needs finances for his farm or industrial activities. Fourth, aiming to help the member to defend his rights. Fifth, putting up stores to help members in their needs a lesser price. So before going back to the Philippines, he sought to see Governor General Eulogio Despujol on his North Borneo project because the latter does not have a response to it. Rizal and his sister Lucia left Hong Kong and returned to Manila in 1892. Despite the warnings and his family's disapproval, so Rizal went back to the Philippines without his family's approval and with the family's warning. Rizal arrived on June 26, 1892 and immediately went to visit his friend in central Luzon. He encouraged them to join the Liga, but sadly, a few days after the Liga's formation, Rizal was captured and brought to Fort Santiago on July 6, 1892. Was brought to Fort Santiago on July 6, 1892, for the accusations that he brought with him from Hong Kong. Leaflets entitled Pobres Friales, or Poor Friars, a satire against the rich Dominican friars and their accumulation of wealth, which was against their vow of poverty. Though untrue, Rizal was exiled in Dapitan, Mindanao. So, Rizal was given accusations about a leaflet entitled Pobres Friales, or Poor Friars. It is a satire against the rich Dominican, which is against their sad accumulation, their sad against vow of poverty. So, though it's untrue, Rizal was still exiled in Dapitan, Mindanao. So this is where it ends with our report. We are the Group 2, Chapter 4. I am Eden Grace Razonable and my group mates are Vanessa Aliazon, Laika May Lagrosa, Sarah Marie Flores, and Gwenelyn Conosan. Thank you. Tadaraba.